People always ask me, is this mushroom edible? I said, well, every mushroom's edible once. It doesn't mean it's going to be good for you. So the key is if you go into eating wild mushrooms, to know what you're eating. I mean, that's no other rule. Just you have to really know what you're doing. And it doesn't take long to learn some of the fundamentals. And I'm going to try to cover some of the fundamental edibles that we have in this area. In fact, all these mushrooms that I'll show tonight, you can find within a radius of 100 miles of Houston. So you don't have to go very far. Next, a few definitions. Mycology is the branch of science for fungi, or the study of fungi. And finally, mycologist is one having the knowledge of fungi. So that's pretty simple. The kingdom of fungi covers a vast variety in biodiversity of organisms. At one time, they were studied as part of botany. But as biologists and scientists looked at their taxonomy and their relationships, they finally decided they should have their own kingdom. So this is just an example of some of the biodiversity. We have the large ones on the left. This is called Microcybe titans, which actually grows in this area. It doesn't get that big here, but it does get that big in Florida. On the right is one called Marasmius. Lower left is one of the Chanterelles that we have here. And the right is the so-called artist conch, which you actually can do artistic work on. Finally, what are mushrooms and fungi? Well, a few definitions. No chlorophyll, so they cannot make their own food. They reproduce by spores instead of seeds, which is important because seeds are they have many cells, whereas the spore is only one cell. The so-called vegetative phase is composed of microscopic thread-like structure called hyphae, or a mass of mycelium. This is mostly cryptic in nature. It's hidden in the soil or in wood or whatever the substrate is. And the walls of this fungi are mostly composed of chitin rather than cellulose. And of course, chitin has more nitrogen in it, so this is a nitrogen-rich organism. And finally, all the mushroom is the reproductive structure of the organism, or the fungus organism. It's like the analogy is a apple to a tree. The mushroom is that to the fungus organism, which you cannot see. They have three functions in nature. One is they're saprophytes, where they live off dead organic matter and decompose it using enzymatic reactions. Others are parasites, where they attack and kill other organisms. And finally, the most interesting relationship are the mutualists. These are symbiotic relationships with other organisms, mostly algae and plants, higher plants. And fully, I would say 90% of all plants have some sort of mycorrhiza. And there's actually 7 basic types of mycorrhiza, but that's another lecture, so we won't go into that. Just an example, this is the lichen symbiosis. And this is actually, mushroom is not part of the lichen, it's just happened to be growing there. Because the lichen is composed of an algae and a fungus in combination. Finally, the one that's really intriguing is the mycorrhiza. This is the symbiotic relationship between higher plants like beech trees, oak trees, hickories, and so on, willows, with fungi. And most of this is wrong one, hold on. Most of this is a hidden part, the mycelium in the soil. This is the cryptic nature. This is what you do not see. All these fungal tips, the fungal mycelium, are actually intertwined with the roots of the tree. So that's how the tree gets nutrients and the fungus gets sugars from the tree. So it's a true mutualistic symbiosis. There's several groups of fungi, but for the most part, we'll look at the so-called Basidiomycota and the Ascomycota. These are the 2 large groups that are really have the more apparent fruiting bodies. They're, you can see puffballs or mushrooms you buy in the store and such as that. Now the Basidiomycota have a basidium. This is a microscopic structure that generally has 4 spores that are shot off, so they can go and reproduce. The mushroom life cycle, it's fairly simple. You have the mushroom fruiting body, produces the spores. The spores are shot off. They go into the soil. They germinate. They form what's called a hyphae in the soil by the germination. These hyphae fuse, and you form another organism. And eventually they form a primordium, which is the baby mushroom. And these things usually lay dormant for a while until you get rain or the right conditions, and then all of a sudden they appear overnight in many cases. Sometimes it takes a while, but basically If you have mushrooms on your lawn, you'll see, one day you see them, you get the rain, the next day they're up, because they're there, they just need the water to go ahead and expand. So it's really a hydrostatic type of reaction, because the cells are preformed and they grow. The mushroom anatomy, basically, let's see, we have the cap of pallius, we have the stipe or stem. On the bottom we have the reproductive part. This is the gills or other structures. Many have a cup-like thing called a vulva, and some have an annulus or skirt on the stipe. And this defines, well, it's kind of a broad definition because there's all kinds of forms of mushrooms. When looking for mushrooms, it's important to get the different stages of development, especially if you decide to go out and eat, let's say, Amanitas. These are the ones that have some of the most, poisonous and edible mushrooms. Let's see. Okay, Agaricus. I'm getting ahead of myself. The Agaricus are the ones that have the radiating plates underneath where the spores are produced. This is a large group. This is the group most people are familiar with. One of the things you first want to do is do a spore print, because the spore print will help you get the mushroom into the right family. The spore prints vary from pure white to really almost to black. And there's browns and rusty browns and other colors in between. And we actually have one that has a green spore print that is common here. One of the little tricks I do, I put the mushroom capsule, sever the cap, put it on a piece of paper, but in my case I use pieces of plastic, because you can get the plastic and hold it up against paper and see the subtle shades, because some of these shades are quite hard to tell apart on paper, so this works quite well. Let's see, okay. Now, first one we're going to talk about are the Amanitas, and this is some of the most feared and the most loved mushrooms, because some have some really toxic components. And the genus Amanita is basically is characterized with the vulva and the scrotum, the annulus, and 3 gills and a white spore print. And that pretty well defines the genus. It's a pretty well-defined genus. And right here you can see there's the skirt and there's the vulva. So it's pretty easy to distinguish. Now, among its members, we have, like I said, some of the most toxic mushrooms found. And we do have these in our area. If you have oak trees, chances are you'll see this under your oak trees, because this is probably symbiotic with oak trees. This is the so-called destroying angel, or the Amanita bisporidea complex. A complex, of course, we're finding with DNA and other studies that there's more than one species involved. And one of the interesting reactions to tell if this is a bisporidea, put potassium hydroxide on the cap, it turns bright yellow. So this is an easy chemical test if you have potassium hydroxide. Now, for you ones of you that are chemically inclined, I'm trained as a chemist, so I have to throw this in. This is the structure of the toxin. So it's called a bicyclic octopeptide. It's a protein. What do you think? Well, proteins. Well, most proteins you denature when you heat them, right? Well, in this case, you can heat this thing. It does not denature the protein. So you eat the mushroom, about 8 hours later, the thing starts destroying your liver. It recirculates through your kidneys, and, well, you're in trouble then. And unfortunately, if you eat too much, it takes about 3 to 5 days to die from it. But if you eat a smaller amount, you might survive, and in severe cases, you can get liver transplants. So this is one you just don't want to mess around with. Now, on the other hand, we have what's called the Amanita jacksonii, which is the so-called American Caesars. This is the one that well, this is not the same as they find in Europe. We found out the American Caesars and the European Caesars are 2 different species. This is our American Caesars, which is called now Amanita jacksonii. Excellent edible. We eat it all the time. In fact, I think my wife is actually eating it raw, which we don't recommend, but sometimes you can eat certain ones raw. They recommend never eat a raw mushroom. Now, this is pretty easy to distinguish. You can tell it's got the skirt. You can't see the vulva, but it has a white vulva. And it has this kind of orange-yellow cap with these striations. Well, that's pretty easy to tell, right? Well, as always in cases of science, what is this? Very much a look-alike. This is the Amanita muscaria, which has the orange cap too. But you notice there's no striations on the margin. It has lots more warts on the cap. This is poisonous and sort of hallucinogenic. Some people actually eat it with some amount of impunity, but I wouldn't recommend it. Now, I always told people, well, the Jacksonii is a summer mushroom. Muscaria is a fall mushroom. So, you know, if you find something in the fall that looks like this, well, it's probably a muscaria. Or if you find one in the summer, it's Jacksonii. Well, guess what? Always in science, there's exceptions. And I'm finding out with the warmer weather we're having, especially going into the winter now, these Jacksonii will fruit into the fall now, into the November. And these actually found these two species within 20 feet of each other. So you got to really be careful. I mean, they're superficial. They look a lot alike. So word of warning. A couple more Amanitas. This is a very large genus, and we have probably one of the most diverse Amanita floras in the world right here along the Gulf Coast. In fact, probably half the species have no names. Actually, this one does. This is Amanita polypores. It gets a foot across. It's a huge mushroom, foot tall, grows in the fall into pine trees. Another one, this is a really strange and rare one. This is Amanita westii. We actually rediscovered this back, about 25 years ago over in Newton County. It hadn't been found since it first was described in 1937 in Florida. So we found more, and we finally wrote a little paper about it because it sort of extended its distribution from Florida to Texas. And since then we've found it a few more times, but it's really extremely rare. But one of the most enigmatic mushrooms because this, it's white spored, but if you look at the gills are chocolate brown. But it's got white spores, so anyway, one of my favorites in it too. Another one that's interesting. Now, the Amanitas are mostly mycorrhizal, but there's a few exceptions. This is Amanita tiercii. It's named for Harry Tiers, who did the pioneering work on mycology in Texas back in the 50s. He discovered this at Texas A&M University back in the 50s. It was named for him because he had their own name on it. And it grows on lawns. In fact, you probably see this on lawns around Houston. It's non-mycorrhizal. Actually, they've done work with it to find out it actually decomposes cellulose. And another thing, too, it's one of the mushrooms that we have good documentation. It's actually moving north with warmer climates. It's discovered here in Texas in the 50s. It's found in Mexico, so it's a tropical to subtropical species. But now it's found as far north as southern Illinois. So it's gradually moving north and east. Now, on to another family. These are the Lepiotaceae family. This is sort of resembles the Amanitas. But let's see, this is the one that you see on lawns in the summertime. And I get many poisoning cases about this mushroom because it's not edible. I mean, it's really appealing, like it's large mushroom. And I've had people that actually eat it, not know what they're doing. They get awfully sick. They don't die, but they get awfully sick. And here it is close up. It has the scales on the cap. It has the annulus, but it has no vulva. And one thing about chlorophyllium, it has a green spore print. So it's one of the few mushrooms that has a green spore print. So it's pretty easy to characterize. A few others. This is, I bet you, if you grow plants, you've seen this in your greenhouse. This is Leucocaprinus burbermii. Grows in potted plants, grows wild. It's found almost all around the world. The whole thing is yellow. And we have another one, grows in the woods. This is Leucocaprinus fragilissimus. The name is very appropriate because it's about this tall, and by noon it just sort of falls over from the heat of the day. The next family we'll talk about are the Hygrophoraceae. This is the so-called waxy caps. These have the gill structure is such, if you rub it between your fingers, it has sort of a waxy consistency because the gills are quite thick and the basidia are quite long, so it feels really waxy. So it's kind of a good characteristic, field characteristic to see if you have it or not. Another feature about them, they're quite colorful. You have reds, yellows, oranges, and actually some green ones too. This is Miniatus, which is our most common one. A few more of interest. This is Hygrophoraceae Mississippiensis, which was described from Mississippi back in the 70s. And we finally found it in Texas a couple years, well, about 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And another one, Hygrophoraceae chameleon. This is just found in 2007 in Texas. It was once again described from Mississippi by a colleague of mine. The interesting thing about it, chameleon, well, that's kind of an intriguing name. Why? Look at the cap. The cap is this kind of reddish maroon. As it ages, it turns just kind of a yucky looking color. But what you do, you lick it, and it reverts back to the original color. And my colleague that wrote the paper, actually, who was a physicist too, actually did the mathematics to show why it did this color change, because of the way the light went through the cuticle. But that's another story. But anyway, beautiful mushroom. This is found over in the big thicket. And this is really intriguing. This is one that I just found in 2009. I was mowing grass on my mother-in-law's lawn. I kept seeing these black spots appear. I thought it was a slime mold, and I got out to investigate. And this thing was down in the grass, pretty deep. So I said, well, this is, well, I thought I knew what it was. Well, I was wrong. I thought it was something called Hygrophoraceae conicus, which blackens. But this is one that I said to a colleague, and she said, no, this is Atrosquamosa, described by Pegler from Martinique and Trinidad. So this is one of our tropical species that's made its way to the Gulf Coast. And we find it occasionally, but it's an intriguing species. Finally, I'll go another family, the Russulaceae. These are mushrooms that rather have a rather brittle consistency to them, because they have these round cells called spherocysts. And this gives the mushroom, most mushrooms have hyphae that's fibrous, so it doesn't break readily, but these things, since they have these spherical cells, you can take one and throw it against a tree, and it sort of shatters into 1,000 pieces. And also the spores with iodine will turn blue. And a lot of these spores have reticulations and ornamentation, which gives it good characteristics under the microscope. Because we'll get to the Russula disc. Let's go about Lactarius. There's two genera in here. There's Lactarius, which is the milk mushroom, which exudes latex. And this is Bolete, which is good edible, by the way. And then we have Lactarius indigo, which is probably the easiest mushroom to identify. It's just beautiful. And it's common with our oaks in our bottomlands. Anyway, these two genera are quite common and prevalent in our area. In fact, I would say we have half the species of Lactarius in North America down here on the Gulf Coast. A couple of other examples. This is Paradoxus, which you should have right now under pine trees in Houston, because it's a winter mushroom. Indigo is a summer mushroom. Paradoxus is a winter mushroom. And both of those are edible. I don't think the indigo is very remarkable. Yeah, well, okay. Okay, no toxins. Another one, this is when it changes color to this sort of purple. This is subpalustris, which is fairly common. And probably the most beautiful one we have, this is Salmonius, which grows with pine trees in the summertime. And it is edible. Okay, now that's Lactarius. The sister genus is Russula. It lacks the latex of Lactarius. They have some of the most colorful caps of the whole spectrum of the rainbow you can find in Russulas. Reds, yellows, greens, and so on and so on. But taxonomically, they're a nightmare because they're hard to identify. I mean, if you're going to work with Russulas, you need to set aside a day to do it, because you have to do spore prints, you have to peel the cuticle, you have to do these chemical tests, and so on. And then maybe you have to resort to the microscope because of the spores and things like this. I have a colleague who is a world expert on Russula. He's come to Texas many times, and he says we probably have 500 species on the Gulf Coast. And probably half have no name, so it's wide open field. Anyway, Russula flavida, which is yellow. Then we have Russula virescens, which has this green cap. Then we have Russula texensis. This is one my colleague and I described actually from our property in Newton County back in 2009. This is what's called the holotype. This is the type collection that described it. This is the only specimen known. We've only found it one time since, and I've looked for it ever since. I cannot find it again. So it's quite a rare mushroom. This has a rather purplish reddish cap, and it's called one of the fishy russulas because it has a sort of fishy smell to it. Another one, we just described this one last year. This is Russula Cortinarius, which we've been kicking around for a number of years, but finally my colleague Bart decided, well, there's enough differences to make it a new species, and he's done the DNA and all the microscopy to say it's a new species. So this is one that's fairly common, and so far we've only seen it in East Texas, nowhere else. So a real puzzle. Another one, this is Paleocrustacea. This is one that, once again, it has a provisional name, which means we have not officially described it because we're still, my colleague is still kicking it around to say, well, maybe it's something else, but he's not sure yet. But we have a provisional name, and we recognize it. I mean, we found it in Virginia and Missouri and Texas, so it seems to be widespread. Main thing is it has these rather pastel colors. Now, the final family of white-spored mushrooms are the Tricholomataceae. And this is sort of a pigeonhole of different species that kind of are thrown together in this family. Although now with DNA, they're probably making them in different families. But for right now, we'll just worry about Tricholomataceae. White-spored, and one of the most common ones is the so-called oyster mushroom, which grows on willow trees, oak trees, beech trees. It's excellent edible. And then we have the so-called honey mushroom. This is Armillaria malleata. This is one of the few parasitic mushrooms that we have. It will actually kill trees and then live off the dead tree. And this was on a picture. This is on a stump right outside my door. In fact, we harvested 20 pounds just by stepping out the back door, and we just couldn't eat it all. We had so much of it. Pretty mushroom though. It's got this beautiful yellow cap, and it has the skirt, and it grows in these huge clusters like this. One thing, if you do eat it, make sure you cook it quite well. Some people have trouble with digestion of the chitin. And the sister species to this is Armillaria tubescens. I bet you everybody's seen this on their lawn at some point in the fall. Because if you have buried wood, you'll find these huge clusters of brown mushrooms coming up in the fall. And here's a close-up. And you can notice it's the white spore print. Real common. Once again, you can get tons of this stuff in the fall. And it's good edible too. And finally, we have the one called Lentinula raphanica. This is one that we call the American shiitake. It's closely akin to the shiitake mushroom, and it's edible. And some people are attempting to do the cultivation and all this because this grows in woods, and you can cultivate it. And I guess we've tried it, haven't we?
We found it in Village Creek State Park.
Okay, so we've tried it and lived. So. A couple of others, Tricholomataceae formosa. This is the one that has sort of a scaly cap, grows on pine wood only. It's a summer mushroom. One that grows on leaf litter. You think about leaf litter, all this leaf litter out there, something has to decompose it. This is one of the species in the genus Marasmius, which are kind of little dainty mushrooms. This is a real common, the red-brown cap, the black stipe, and you'll find it attached to leaves. And there's all kinds of marasmoids, but they're kind of fun. Well, they're kind of difficult to work with too, but that's another story. And finally, this is one, the genus Megacalibia. I think we've told a few people we've had these mushroom walks in the big thicket for since 2006. We go out twice a year. We have people come and we go out to do an inventory with the Park Service. And this was brought in, and I sent it to a colleague of mine, and I thought it was another species, and well, I get a letter back. Well, no, this is new to science. So we named it Megacalibia texensis, and it's fairly common in East Texas. And the interesting thing about it is the closest affinities are to species in South America. So once again, it is a little tropical connection to the Gulf Coast fungi. Now, okay, we're going on to, how am I doing on time? I guess I'm okay. Okay. Now, I'm going to go into some other families. This is the Cortinarius. These are species that have different color spore prints. The carts, or Cortinarius as we call them, have rusty brown spore prints. And they have what's called a cortina The cortina is this little spider web-like thing. This is the annulus on the stipe, and it catches the spores. So you got your spore print already made for you, so you don't have to make a spore print. Big genus, it's probably 2,000, 3,000 species in the world, and we don't have that many down here, but we have a good representation. And these are, once again, important mycorrhizal species with trees. And these are basically fall and winter mushrooms. Probably one of the most intriguing ones is one called Cortinarius marylandensis. It's this beautiful red mushroom, and there's a whole subculture in mycology that die with mushrooms. And when I say die, I mean, oops, D-Y-E, not D-I-E. Yeah, get that straight. But anyway, people would take, they strike the pigment. It's what's, well, I'll throw a little chemistry, it's what's called an anthraquinone pigment. And you take different metal salts, copper, chromium, tin, or aluminum, and you get these different colors using the different metal salts. But this is all from the same mushroom. So, really intriguing. And unfortunately, I'm a taxonomist. I don't have time to do my chemistry anymore, so I haven't really investigated these things very much. But some interesting chemistry in these things. A few other interesting ones. This is the so-called corpse finder. This is an undoctored photograph. I took this about in 1975, and this is exactly how I found it around this corpse. And we actually published a paper about it because it was, kind of an interesting ecological relationship. And it has to have a protein, nitrogenous waste to fruit. And for some reason, I guess the spores are dormant until you get a corpse, and then within a year, you'll have these mushrooms popping up around it. So it's a couple of others of interest. This is the genus Genopilus. These are rusty brown spore prints, and they usually grow on pine detritus. Little brown mushrooms. These are mushrooms that are, well, for want of a better name, they're called LBMs because they're hard to identify. Actually, this is one that we did identify because it had good characteristics, but it grows in sphagnum moss. The genus Agaricus. This is one everybody is familiar with, the ones you buy in the store. This is the mushroom of commerce, so to speak, but it's the ones in the wild are so much more diverse than the ones you buy in the store. And some of the ones in the wild are so much better tasting than the ones you buy in the store. For the most part, most are edible. There's a few exceptions. If they smell phenolic or stain yellow immediately, it's probably best not to try them out. But we have a pretty large group down here, and once again, they're not easy to identify. But for the most part, if they smell like almonds, they're probably okay to eat. But call me first. Now, the next group are the boletes. These are mushrooms that have tubes instead of gills. And you can see the tube structure right here. Once again, a large group. These are fleshy mushrooms, the fleshy pore fungi, because you have the hard pore fungi, which we'll talk about in a minute, but these are fleshy pore fungi that are found with trees. And these are a group of edibles also. A few examples. Let's see, here's one that has, actually that has this balloon reaction. It'd be nice if they had the names on the bottom, but anyway. But a lot of them were bruised blue. A lot of them have what's called a reticulation on the stipe. And here's one example, Bilius pinophyllus. You can see the reticulation. This is probably one of the best edibles we have, and unfortunately, it's quite rare down here. We find it every few years, and I don't quite understand why it fruits like it does. I mean, you won't see it for 5 years, and all of a sudden you get a huge fruiting. So I don't know what's going on. But
compare that to the Bolete acidulus.
Okay. The Bolete acidulus is the so-called sap, or the mushroom, the porcini, which is one of the most highly edible and regarded mushrooms in the world. And this is our counterpart down here. We don't have Bolete acidulus in the down here per se, but we do have pinophyllus, which is, to me is just as good. Yeah. A few others. This is a beautiful one, RPs, because of the yellow things. This one is good, also a good edible. This one we just described in 2009. This is new to science. It was actually discovered by a colleague of mine, Bill Rudy. So we put together a paper and we named it for Bill because he discovered it. It's found all the way from West Virginia down to Missouri, Arkansas, down to East Texas. And it's pretty common with us too. This is one we just found 2013. This is what's called Ruboflamus. It has the red tube mouths, this rather large stocky stipe. And so far I've only found it under live oaks. And it's, once again, shows you it's easy to discover new species down here because there's so little work that's been done. And one of the more exotic ones, this is Bolete, which says it resembles a pineapple. This thing was described from, let me think, the Carolinas. It's found all along the Gulf Coast, down into Mexico, and actually found in Malaysia too, so it's got a really distribution. See another one, Puffballs ravenelli. This is when it has actually has a veil, which is unusual for boletes. You can see the veil right here. And we have they've done pharmaceutical work with this thing that shows, it does show some anti-cancer properties. So once again, potential for research in this area. Finally, most of the boletes have what's called an olivaceous spore print, but we have the genus Tricholomataceae, which you can see the tubes are pink. They have a pink spore print. And these are, some are edible, some are not. This is one of the genera of boletes that has a rather bitter taste to it. So you have to, you don't want to throw these things in together indiscriminately. You might get a bad tasting one in there and make it just taste awful. Finally, the genus Symbiosis. This is a group that's only mycorrhizal with pine trees. And this one genus you can find year-round because of the pines are always producing sugars year-round. So you can find Symbiosis almost year-round down here. So it's one of the mushrooms that, all the year. And finally, we have the interesting species. This is Polypores boletinoides. This is sort of my transition type mushroom. You can see it has both pores and gills that are kind of interconnected. But anyway, just one of interest. Now, I'm sure everybody's waiting for the Chanterelles because these are, once again, one of the most common, believe it or not, one of the most common genera of mushrooms we have along the Gulf Coast. They also most highly esteemed for edibility. I mean, if you talk to chefs that know about Chanterelles, you got a good chef because they know what they have. This is Chanterelles Lactarius, which is let's see, yeah, right here. This is just a collection in a matter of about 5 minutes. And here's some more. They're just like gold nuggets in the woods. And on our acreage in East Texas, one year we harvested 100 pounds in about a week. It was incredible. And we couldn't eat them all, so we sold some. But it's a lot of work. Now, Chanterelles, my colleague Bart from France and his colleague Valerie have been coming here a number of years to do research, and Bart's been working on these Chanterelles lately. And I guess starting in 2007, he started really looking at these things in more detail. And let's see, yeah, okay, 2011, new species, Chanterelles altipes. It's found with pine trees. Now the Lactarius is found in the bottomlands. The altipes is found with the pine trees. They don't, no mixing. So these things do have ecological habitats that are quite intriguing. Let's see, another one, Another one, Chanterelles tenothrix, found in with oaks, has a rather white stipe. And according to Bart, the true Chanterelle, Chanterelles siberius, does not occur in North America. This is basically the counterpart. This is the American Chanterelle. So that's what he's calling it anyway. So, and this is also seems to be widespread with oaks and such. And then we have Cinnabarinus, very descriptive name because of the cinnabar colors. Well, you start looking at these things a little more detail, and he took some back, did the DNA, and guess what? We have a look-alike. Chanterelles texensis. This is described from the big thicket over by Saratoga. Morphologically, they look exactly alike. The only way to tell them apart is by the microscope. You have to look at the spore structure and the cuticle structure to tell them apart, and also the DNA. And since then, he's described another couple of species that are quite related to this. So once you start looking at these things with a little more detail, there's a lot more species out there than we realized. And finally, let's see, this is not a chanterelle, but it's related to chanterelles. This is the genus Gomphothus. We just described this in 2014. I found a collection in Jasper County. We had a meeting in Louisiana in December, and fortunately, the World Authority on this genus was at the foray. Well, we see this thing, and Dr. Ron Peterson takes it back to the University of Tennessee, does the DNA, says, nope, it's a new species. I say, okay, so. And the story behind this, it's not called Texensis because you notice Ludovicianus, that means of Louisiana. Well, the so-called type collection is from Louisiana, so we had to call it of Louisiana, so Texas missed out on this one. But we do have a paratype, which is a secondary collection in Texas. And it seems to be fairly common at certain times of the year. It's a fall mushroom, too. Now, I'm going to go into some other groups since we're running low on time, but once going to the Polypores, these are mushrooms that are not fleshy but tough, and they're wood decay fungi. And a few examples, we have the turkey tail, Trichomates versicolor, which I think everybody's probably seen this on wood. Pardon?
You're good on that.
Oh, okay, I'm good, okay.
We lost your microphone, I think.
What? Can't hear me? Uh-oh. Oh, no sec.
Say something.
Okay. Is that okay? Oh, okay. Where was I? Oh, okay. The lookalike to the Trichomates is Sterium austria. This one is, once again, looks superficially like it, but there's enough differences to tell them apart. After Hurricane Rita back in 2005, we lost a lot of trees on our property, a lot of our oaks. Within 6 months, this thing was everywhere. So it just shows you how aggressive of a decomposer it is. It's out there already decomposing the wood within 6 months, which is what we need it to do. Let's see, one of our tropical species, this is Hexagonia hydnoides. It's a tropical species. It's common all the way along the Gulf Coast. Coral fungi, these are ones that resemble sea coral. One that's really beautiful is this one. This is Clavicorona pixidata, which grows on wood, which is interesting. The cauliflower mushrooms, which resembles a cauliflower. And it's edible, by the way. It looks like strips of bacon. Tooth fungi. These are fungi that have teeth. This is a Hericium aeronation. This is really a good edible. You can cut it up and
Sour.
what?
If it's not
If it's not old and sour, it's good edible. You can put it in the oven, bake it. It tastes like lobster. Yeah. Jelly fungi. These are mushrooms that they sort of dry up between rains and rehydrate. Just sort of a strategy to get more spores out. The puffballs. Everybody knows about puffballs, right? These are what's called stomach fungi. The spores are born internally, and they need somebody, animal or raindrops to actually force the spores out. Whereas other mushrooms, they are actually forcibly discharged. A few examples. This is Calvaceous sathiformis, which is real common on lawns in the summer and fall months. Pardon?
The way it went out.
Oh, again. Oh. Can y'all hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll talk louder. Anyway, the puffballs, there's a few rules. As long as it's white inside, it's okay. But once it starts turning brown or yellow, it's no good. And there's a couple of caveats. One is, make sure it's not purple inside. This is the genus Scleroderma, which are poisonous. But cut it in half. If it's white inside, chances are it's a puffball. If it's not, it's something else. A few others I mentioned, the stalked puffball. This has a rather gelatinous stalk that elevates the mushroom so the spores can be thrown out. Earth stars, these are really quite colorful. They looks like, very appropriate name, looks like a star. And then the stinkhorns. I'm sure everybody has seen these things. These are Well, basically, they're mostly winter mushrooms. If you have mulch, I bet you have them on your mulch right now. You can smell these things before you find them. Now, the last group I'm going to talk about are the so-called Ascomycota. These are the ones that eject the spores. They have 8, oops, hold it, sorry. Okay, the spores are in a cell-like structure called an ascus. Usually there's 8 spores and they're forcibly discharged. So this is how they're different from the Basidiomycota. And this is a large and very diverse group of organisms. I mean, I wish I had another lifetime to study these because they're really intriguing, but there's so many of them. And a lot of these are leaf spots and things like that. But the most important one is the yeast. These are the ones that are important in fermentation technology. And you think about bread and wine and all the alcoholic beverages, these are the organisms that give us these great things. So they're Ascomycetes. Morels, these are, someone has asked me about morels. We do have morels in Texas. Unfortunately, I've never seen one around Houston. They seem to prefer limestone or more calcareous soils in central and north Texas. So the season for these is the mid-March to 1st of April. And they're, well, some people like them, some people don't. A few other interesting aspects of this group. This is one that the hypomeces are actually mushrooms that attack other mushrooms. In this case, here's, oops, I keep hitting the wrong button, sorry. Okay, this is the mushroom, and it's slowly being attacked by this red Ascomycete fungus. Now this was considered edible, it's called the lobster, but you never are quite sure about the host. Now we've eaten it, so far so good.
It's considered an excellent edible.
Okay. A few other intriguing ones. This is the genus Cordyceps. These are ones that grow on, well, many different things. In this case, it's on a fly. There's the fruiting structure right there. Yeah, gross, huh? And another one, Cordyceps capitata. This is actually grown on a false truffle. This is a truffle. This is the mushroom that's attacking the truffle. Another one of interest, this is, there's some that grow on cones. We have one that grows on magnolia cones, and we have also some that grow on sweet gum cones. This is a species of Zelaria. And also truffle. People always ask me about,
Pretty close.
okay, I'm almost done. Okay. Okay, truffles. Now, people ask me about truffles. Well, we got truffles in Texas. This is Tuber lyonia, also known as Tuber texensis. Originally it was described as texensis, but they found out an earlier name took preference, so they had to give this other name back to it. You've got pecan trees, go out there around your drip line and dig down a little bit and see if you've got truffles. And unfortunately, I don't have much data about these things. I wish people would look at them more closely and get some seasonality to them, because I don't know when they fruit or anything like that. But that would be something someone that has a pecan grove to look into. Finally, we have several undescribed species. This is one we found on our front lawn. I sent it to the expert. He says, well, it's a new species, send more material to describe it. Well, I haven't found it since, so this is a problem. Now, this is something to really think about. You know, I don't know how many of you are familiar with biodiversity studies by many scientists, but we're finding out in mycology. This was done by a British scientist based on the number of fungi in relationship to plants in Great Britain back in '91. And based on that estimates, he figured there was 1.5 million species of fungi still to be found. Wow. That's 5% of what's known. Since this was published, they've actually upped the ante a little bit more. I mean, it depends who you talk to, but basically, I think since '91, they've described at least 2,000 new species of fungi every year since. So it's, who knows, I mean, we've found probably in the big thicket in the last 10 years, at least 15, no, more than that, probably about 25 new species so far we've named. And we're still working on them. So anyways, this is a thought to ponder. Let's see, oh, this is one of the hazards to working on the Gulf Coast. This is Hurricane Rita bearing down on the Texas coast back in 2005, which I think we all experienced this, and it did change a lot of the ecological relationships. So it's, you know, these things, acts of nature are something to also think about. And I think that's it.